trying to address the tax revenue that the National Tax Agency is able to sort of glean from all of the from the alcohol sales, and that revenue has dropped dramatically over the last over the last 10 years potentially. But they noticed the change, I think, and thought we better do something to try and build up the coffers again.
Now, talk us through the backlash that's come as a result of that. How severe has it been, and what are people most upset about?
Look, this isn't the first time that a marketing department or somebody responsible for marketing, came out with a weird campaign or developed some idea that they thought would be terrific that people have taken issue with. And I mean, I only have to think about the "Where the bloody hell are you" tourism campaign for an example of a campaign that really didn't work in a lot of Asian countries because nobody could understand what that meant in any case, But I would imagine that the government department in place said to themselves, what can we do? They've probably come up with an agency, to look at it, and they've said to themselves, well, this would be fun. Let's get young people to talk about what it is that we should be doing in terms of pitching to change the way that things are drinking, or, like how people are drinking, what they're doing, what type of drinks they like. But of course, the backlash has come because it's not necessarily the healthiest idea. Those consumption patterns have changed potentially for very good reasons. And so it might not be the wisest thing to have a government telling people that they should simply be drinking more.
Just on that, like many countries, alcohol plays a role in both work and social culture in Japan. But just how severe is alcoholism there compared to other places?
The very fact that the revenue has dropped to the point that it has indicates that, it's changing. The COVID, situation, the pandemic has definitely changed the way that people work and how they, entertain potentially. There was a great pressure on people to sort of join their work colleagues after work and to stay out quite late. So that sort of probably pushed a lot of people who weren't happy drinking into a position where they might have had to have drunk more than they would normally. So, the pandemic came along and it gave people an opportunity to work from home and therefore be sort of removed from that pressure. And I think that's a terrifically healthy thing for Japan, that we don't see those sort of moments where people are pushed into going out for drinks with people, and that people feel that they can actually stay with their families and the like. But, the alcoholism itself is obviously a problem in a country where there are limited restrictions over the purchase of alcohol.
Japan received over 1 trillion yen last year through this alcohol tax. That's down from previous years, but it's still a significant amount of money. But what's the knock-on effect that alcohol has had in things like the health sector and outreach programs for alcoholics in Japan? During the pandemic, it must have been even worse.
Well, and this week, one of the other announcements that was made was about the tragic number of people who have, in fact, committed suicide throughout the 2.5 years of the pandemic, in addition to what would normally be the case. And a lot of those people, it's been determined, were in fact the vulnerable parts of our society, and mostly women who were only ever being paid, irregular and or part-time wages. And those jobs sort of went by the wayside, as has happened in Australia. So there's been a lot of societal pressure in Japan caused by the pandemic. And, one of those things, if you think that you could release people from that pressure of staying out and having to drink so late, potentially, and of course it hasn't completely stopped, but, that means that people might be getting home to spend more time with families and then hopefully be able to do things with those families like sport and, looking after their health. So it's sort of like, the government departments are operating in a silo. So they've said to themselves, this is our job, we have to get the revenue up. But they should be working in tandem with the health department and looking, and even the sports agency. What can we do to make people, healthier? So yeah, it's one of those issues. Says she, about to have a glass of Tasmanian Pinot Noir. So I can't necessarily take the high ground on this, but I think that these agencies need to work with each other, that's for sure.
It is a Friday night. We're not going to hold it against you. So let's look at the other side of that coin, though. So how hard has it been for bars and restaurants in Japan since the start of the pandemic?
very hard. I've seen a lot of those bars and restaurants close. Some have survived and done very well. They've been supported to a certain extent. The Japanese government can't, under the constitution, lock down us, so we weren't, subjected to lockdowns per se. But what they did was ask for various bars and restaurants to sort of, at their own sort of, volition, to sort of close for a certain period of time and not serve alcohol. And for that, they were given some kind of subsidies, or some were. But that meant that a lot of the businesses that were potentially sort of, sole operator type of operations would probably have, said to themselves, do we stay the distance or do we just use this opportunity to close? So it's been quite a moment. On top of that, of course, you don't have tourists back in Japan. The borders remain closed, essentially. So, where you would get some traffic to those restaurants and bars from tourists, that's also not there. So it's a difficult time for the hospitality sector, that's for sure.
It's been getting pretty desperate in some cases from what we're reading. There was one wine bar that was trying to sell itself as an alternative space for people to work remotely. So people rock up with their laptops and they work in this wine bar while they're having a few glasses of wine. So it's gotten pretty concerning in some areas there.
I need to know the name of that place, obviously, because I could probably, head there. But, I think that there's definitely a way, and to be fair to this agency or the people working in that tax department, they've tried to come up with something that's creative, like that wine bar, to try and bring people and patrons back to their business. But, what you really want is for people to be working aside each other and looking at what might be right for the society, rather than singling, choosing one particular area. I'd love to see the government work harder at delivering opportunities for women to return to the workforce, because, of course, that productivity increase that will drive more tax revenue increase, surely. So, there are probably some areas where we might need to step back and look at things in a holistic way. But, the creative work that a lot of people are doing is everything that they can stay afloat. So it's tricky times for them.
It's a very complicated issue, but we appreciate your time speaking to us about it tonight, Melanie. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.